The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Grand Palmer Hotel as a well-dressed woman stepped through its ornate revolving doors, pulling her small carry-on suitcase. She had just wrapped up another successful court case and was looking forward to the upcoming business conference. The smell of fresh flowers and polished wood filled the grand lobby, and the soft sounds of classical music floated through the air. As a top corporate attorney with 15 years of experience, she had stayed at luxury hotels across the country. This time, she'd chosen the Grand Palmer not just for its 5-star rating, but also for its convenient location near the conference center. She'd made her reservation 3 months in advance and even received a confirmation email just that morning. Walking up to the front desk, she noticed how the clerk's welcoming smile suddenly faded. The clerk's eyes darted to a manager standing nearby, and an uncomfortable silence fell over the desk. "Good evening," the woman said warmly, placing her designer bag on the counter. "I have a reservation for the next 3 nights." The clerk typed slowly into the computer, avoiding eye contact. "I'm sorry, but I'm not seeing any reservation under your name." The woman remained calm, pulling out her phone to show the confirmation email. "I have it right here, along with the confirmation number." Just then, a couple walked up to the second desk clerk. Within minutes, they were handed their room keys with bright smiles and wishes for a pleasant stay. The woman couldn't help but notice they had walked in without a reservation. "I apologize." The manager stepped forward, his voice dripping with fake concern, "but we're completely booked for the conference. Perhaps there was a system error with your reservation." He spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a child, making the woman's heart race with silent anger. Standing there in her tailored suit, her law degree hanging in her office, just 20 blocks away, she felt her throat tighten. She'd faced moments like these before, at restaurants, in stores, even at other hotels. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was hearing the clerk whisper those people to the manager when they thought she couldn't hear. Or maybe it was watching another guest get a room without any reservation at all. Instead of causing a scene, she took a deep breath and pulled out her phone again, this time to record. She asked clear, professional questions about their booking system, their reservation policy, and their current occupancy. Each answer they gave dug them deeper into their web of discrimination. As she walked out of the hotel that evening, she wasn't defeated. Her mind was already working like the skilled attorney she was, forming a plan. She had faced prejudice before, but she had never let it stop her. This time wouldn't be any different. In fact, this time would be special. Finding another hotel took just a few minutes. Perks of being a platinum member at several chains. But as she settled into her new room, she wasn't thinking about the inconvenience. She was thinking about the young professionals who might face the same treatment next week, next month, or next year. She was thinking about change. Real, lasting change. That night, as she prepared her notes for the next day's conference, she made another set of notes too. She documented everything while it was fresh in her mind. Every word, every gesture, every inconsistency. Her hands moved quickly across her laptop keyboard, listing names, times, and details. Within her professional circle, she was known for turning difficult situations into opportunities. And as she looked at the Grand Palmer's website one more time, a plan began to take shape in her mind. Little did the hotel staff know that their discriminatory actions that day would set in motion a chain of events that would completely transform their future. The woman they had turned away wasn't just any corporate attorney. She was about to become their biggest nightmare, and eventually, something even more surprising. What happened next would not only change her life, but would become a powerful story of turning discrimination into triumph. The morning after the hotel incident, she sat in her home office, surrounded by the gentle morning light streaming through her windows. Her coffee had gone cold, forgotten as she focused on her laptop screen. As a lawyer, she knew the power of documentation, but this was different. This was personal. She pulled up her phone's video recording from the previous evening. Even now, hours later, hearing their dismissive tones made her stomach tighten. But instead of letting anger take over, she channeled that energy into action. One by one, she downloaded screenshots of her confirmed reservation, the cancellation email they'd sent after she'd left, and the photos she'd taken of other guests checking in without reservations. Her friend from college, now working as a local news reporter, picked up on the first ring. "You won't believe what happened," she began, her voice steady despite the emotions bubbling underneath. As she shared her story, her friend's journalistic instincts kicked in. "Have you checked if there are other similar complaints?" she asked. That question sparked something. For the next few hours, she delved deep into research. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, searching through review sites, social media posts, and local business forums. What she found made her sit back in her chair stunned. The Grand Palmer had a pattern. A carefully hidden but unmistakable pattern of turning away certain guests. She created a spreadsheet, organizing the complaints by date, type, and outcome. Some people had been told their reservations were lost. Others faced mysterious system errors. A few had even been quoted rates 3 times higher than the standard price. The stories were different, but the underlying message was the same. Taking a break to stretch her legs, she walked to her kitchen window, watching the neighborhood kids playing basketball in the street. Their laughter reminded her of her own childhood dreams of making a difference in the world. She'd become a lawyer to fight injustice, but this situation called for something more strategic. Back at her desk, she reached out to other guests who had shared similar experiences. Her inbox slowly filled with responses, some angry, some hurt, all willing to share their stories. Each email added another piece to the puzzle, strengthening her case. She contacted colleagues from her civil rights network, legal professionals who had handled similar cases. Their advice was invaluable, helping her see angles she hadn't considered. One particular conversation stuck with her. Sometimes the best way to change a broken system is to become part of it. That evening, as she organized all the evidence into neat digital folders, her phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged the hotel in a social media post about their own discriminatory experience. Just hours after her incident, the post was gaining traction, with comments pouring in from others sharing similar stories. She watched as the hotel's carefully crafted online image began to crack. Their generic responses to complaints only highlighted their inability to address the real issue. But she wasn't interested in just exposing them. She wanted lasting change. Before going to bed, she made one final call to her financial advisor. "I need to know everything about this property," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Their market value, their debt, their corporate structure, everything." Her advisor picked up on her tone immediately. "I know that voice," he said. "You're planning something big, aren't you?" She smiled, looking at the vision board hanging on her wall, the one she created years ago when she first started her law career. Among the images of success and justice, she'd written a quote, "Don't just fight the system, transform it." As she closed her laptop for the night, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than any anger or hurt from the previous day. The hotel staff thought they were dealing with just another guest they could dismiss. They had no idea they had just awakened a force for change. Tomorrow, she would start making calls to her network of business contacts and investors. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment to imagine walking through those same hotel doors again. Not as a rejected guest, but as something entirely different. The path ahead would be challenging, but she had documentation, determination, and a dream. Sometimes, that's all you need to start a revolution. The investigation into the Grand Palmer Hotel took an unexpected turn when she received a mysterious email one rainy morning. A former employee of the hotel had seen the growing social media discussions and wanted to talk. They agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop downtown, away from curious eyes and ears. The former employee, who had worked at the front desk for 3 years, arrived clutching a folder full of papers. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as they sat in a corner booth, their voices low but intense. "What I saw there, it wasn't right. the ex-employee began, hands trembling slightly while opening the folder. It wasn't just random incidents. They had an actual system. According to the documents, the hotel used special codes in their booking system to flag certain reservations. They had carefully worded emails, saved as templates for cancellations. Even their training manual had subtle but clear instructions about maintaining the hotel's preferred guest profile. Reading through these papers, she felt her legal mind clicking pieces into place like a puzzle. But the biggest revelation came when the former employee mentioned the hotel's financial troubles. Behind its luxurious facade, the Grand Palmer was struggling. Room occupancy had been dropping steadily for the past 2 years. Their outdated policies weren't just morally wrong, they were bad for business. Back in her office, she dug deeper into the hotel's public records. Property tax assessments, business licenses, health inspection reports. Everything told a story. The hotel's parent company had taken out several large loans recently. Their credit rating had dropped. Even their insurance costs had gone up due to increasing complaints. She reached out to a friend who worked in the hospitality industry, the Grand Palmer. Her friend had said, surprise evident in her voice. Yeah, word is they're in trouble. The whole chain is struggling to keep up with modern hotels. Their reputation isn't helping either. That afternoon, she visited the local courthouse. As she walked through the marble hallways, her heels clicking against the floor, she thought about all the people who had been turned away from the hotel. In the records room, she found 5 different discrimination lawsuits filed against the hotel in the past year alone. Most had been quietly settled out of court. While going through these files, a court clerk who had worked there for decades stopped by her table. You know, the clerk whispered, looking around before continuing, I've seen so many cases against them over the years. But nothing ever really changes. They just pay the settlements and keep doing the same thing. This information sparked an idea. She pulled out her phone and called her investment banker. Remember when you told me I should diversify my portfolio? She said, a plan forming in her mind. I think I've found the perfect opportunity. That evening, she sat on her balcony, watching the city lights come alive as the sun set. She had spread all the documents across her outdoor table, the former employee's papers, the court records, the financial reports. A gentle breeze ruffled the pages as she pieced together everything she had learned. The hotel's discriminatory practices weren't just a social justice issue anymore. They were a business vulnerability. In today's world, where social media could make or break a company's reputation overnight, the Grand Palmer was sitting on a time bomb. She picked up her phone and started making more calls, to business associates, to successful friends, to people who shared her vision of change. I'm putting together an investment group, she explained. We're going to buy a hotel. Some thought she was crazy. Others got excited immediately. One friend, a real estate developer, asked a question everyone was thinking. Are you sure you want to take this on? It's a huge risk. She looked at the city skyline, where she could just make out the Grand Palmer's rooftop in the distance. Sometimes, she replied, the biggest risks bring the biggest changes. As night fell, she organized all her findings into a comprehensive report. This wasn't just about personal revenge anymore. It was about creating real, lasting change in the business world. The Grand Palmer Hotel had no idea that their biggest transformation was about to begin, led by the very person they had turned away. And this was just the beginning of her plan. The next steps would require careful timing, smart strategy, and the kind of courage that comes from knowing you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. The autumn breeze carried the smell of fresh coffee through her open office window as she reviewed the latest financial reports about the Grand Palmer Hotel. 3 weeks had passed since the incident, and what started as a personal mission had grown into something much bigger. That morning, she had received an interesting call from her business contact in the banking sector. The hotel chain just missed another loan payment, he said, trying to contain his excitement. Their stock price is dropping. If there was ever a perfect time to make a move, it's now. She walked to the large whiteboard in her office, where she had mapped out her strategic plan. Red markers highlighted the hotel's weaknesses: outdated management, mounting lawsuits, declining reputation. Blue markers showed opportunities: prime location, historic building, untapped potential. Her fingers traced the connections between different points as she thought about her next move. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Her investment team had arrived for their weekly meeting. The conference room filled with passionate voices as they discussed their vision for transforming the hotel. An architect brought preliminary renovation plans. A hospitality expert shared market research showing growing demand for inclusive luxury hotels. "Look at these numbers," the financial advisor pointed to his laptop screen. "The hotel's current value is at its lowest in 5 years. But with the right management and a modern approach, we could double their revenue within 18 months. During lunch, she received an unexpected text from the former hotel employee who had helped her earlier. "You might want to check today's business news," it read. She quickly pulled up the article on her phone. The Grand Palmer's parent company had just announced major leadership changes. The timing couldn't have been better. That afternoon, she visited her old mentor, a retired hotel magnate who had built his empire from scratch. They sat in his home office, surrounded by photos of hotels he had owned around the world. "The trick isn't just buying a property," he advised, pouring them both tea. "It's about seeing what it could become." She shared her vision: a hotel that would set new standards for luxury and inclusion. A place where every guest would feel valued, regardless of their background. Where excellent service wasn't just a slogan, but a lived reality. Her mentor listened, nodding slowly, a smile growing on his face. "You know what's interesting?" he said, reaching for an old photo album. 30 years ago, I tried to buy the Grand Palmer. They wouldn't sell to me because of who I was. Now here you are, about to do what I couldn't. Sometimes life comes full circle in the most beautiful ways." Driving back to her office, she thought about all the pieces falling into place. The hotel's financial struggles, the changing market demands, her team's expertise. Everything aligned perfectly. But she knew the hardest part was still ahead. She spent the evening making calls to potential investors. Many were intrigued by the opportunity, especially when she explained her plans for modernizing the hotel while preserving its historic charm. One investor, particularly moved by her story, offered to double his initial investment. At midnight, she stood by her apartment window, looking out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed with an email from her legal team. They had drafted the initial purchase offer. Everything was ready. Tomorrow, she would take the first official step toward buying the hotel that had turned her away. The irony wasn't lost on her, but this wasn't about revenge. It was about turning a symbol of discrimination into a beacon of change. She thought about that evening when she had walked out of the Grand Palmer, feeling humiliated but not defeated. If someone had told her then that she would soon be positioning herself to buy the entire property, she might not have believed it. But here she was, with a solid plan, a strong team, and an unwavering vision. As she finally prepared for bed, she smiled at the thought of the hotel's current owners receiving her offer. They had no idea that their next boss would be the very person they had judged so poorly. Sometimes, the best response to discrimination isn't just fighting back. It's rising above and creating lasting change. The next few weeks would be crucial, but she was ready. After all, the best kind of success is the one that opens doors for others too. The conference room buzzed with energy as her team gathered around the large oak table. Spread before them were stacks of papers, market analyses, and architectural drawings of the Grand Palmer Hotel. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting the determination on everyone's faces. "Our research shows something interesting," her market analyst began, pointing to a colorful chart. "Luxury hotels that embrace diversity don't just do well. They're actually leading the market. Modern travelers want more than just fancy rooms. They want to support businesses that share their values." She stood up and walked to the window, remembering her own experience at the hotel. 6 weeks had passed since that incident, and now she was about to present their business plan to major investors. Life had a funny way of turning things around. Her phone buzzed. Another discrimination complaint had just been filed against the hotel. This time, a famous musician had been turned away despite having a confirmed booking. The news was spreading quickly on social media, causing the hotel's stock to drop even further. "This is our moment," she told her team, turning back to face them. "We're not just buying a building. We're buying an opportunity to show the world how a luxury hotel should really operate." Her voice carried the weight of personal experience mixed with professional vision. They spent the afternoon fine-tuning their business plan. The renovations would happen in phases, keeping half the hotel open while updating the other half. The historic charm would be preserved while adding modern amenities. Most importantly, they would implement new training programs and hiring policies that would make the hotel a model of inclusive luxury. Her financial advisor brought up an interesting point during their lunch break. "You know what's remarkable?" he said between bites of his sandwich. "The changes we're planning. Better service, modern amenities, inclusive policies. They're not just morally right. They're actually good business decisions that will save money in the long run." Later that day, she visited the city's historical society. The elderly librarian there shared fascinating stories about the hotel's early days. "It was built in 1925, she explained, showing old photographs. "Back then, it was actually known for welcoming guests that other hotels turned away. Somewhere along the way, they lost that spirit." This piece of history added another layer to her mission. She wasn't just creating something new, she was restoring the hotel's original values. Back in her office, she received an exciting email. A group of minority business owners wanted to invest in her project. They saw it as a chance to be part of meaningful change in the luxury hotel industry. Their support would add another powerful dimension to the transformation she envisioned. As evening approached, she met with her HR consultant to discuss staffing plans. "We'll keep most of the current employees," she explained, "but we'll retrain everyone, from the doorman to the managers. And we'll bring in new talent too, creating the most diverse luxury hotel team in the city." The consultant nodded approvingly. "You know what's powerful about this plan? You're not just changing policies. You're changing the whole culture of the place." Walking home that night, she passed by the Grand Palmer. Through the grand windows, she could see guests checking in, staff moving about, life going on as usual. Soon, everything would be different, not just for her, but for every person who would walk through those doors. Her phone rang again. It was one of the potential investors, a successful restaurant chain owner. "I've reviewed your business plan," he said. "It's brilliant. You're not just fixing what's broken. You're creating a new standard for the industry. Count me in." Back home, she added his commitment to their growing list of investors. The numbers were looking good, really good. What had started as a response to discrimination had grown into a solid business venture that was attracting serious attention. She stayed up late that night, making final adjustments to their presentation. Tomorrow, they would meet with the biggest investor group yet. As she worked, she thought about all the people who had faced discrimination at hotels like the Grand Palmer. Soon, they would have a different story to tell. This wasn't just about buying a hotel anymore. It was about proving that doing the right thing and running a successful business weren't just compatible. They were inseparable. The morning of the acquisition meeting arrived with a mix of rain and sunshine. Perfect weather for making history. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her lucky blazer, the same one she'd worn when she first became a lawyer. Today wasn't just another business meeting. It was the moment everything would change. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Investors were sending last-minute confirmations, lawyers were double-checking documents, and her team was sharing encouraging messages. But one text stood out. It was from her grandmother. "Remember, baby, sometimes closed doors lead to open opportunities." The Grand Palmer's boardroom was impressive, with its dark wood panels and oil paintings of past owners lining the walls. As she walked in with her team, the current hotel owners barely hid their surprise. They clearly hadn't expected their potential buyer to be the same woman they turned away just 2 months ago. "Let's talk numbers," she began, her voice steady and confident. She laid out the offer, a fair price that acknowledged both the hotel's current struggles and its potential. Her team presented market analyses, renovation plans, and projected revenues. The hotel owners shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. During the presentation, news broke that another luxury hotel chain had just won a major diversity award, their bookings soaring as a result. One of her team members smoothly pulled up the article on the projector. "This could be the Grand Palmer's future," she pointed out, "under the right leadership." The negotiations were intense. Hours passed as they discussed terms, conditions, and transition plans. Coffee cups emptied and filled again. Outside the boardroom windows, the sun crossed the sky, painting the room in different shades of light. "Your offer is interesting," the hotel's CEO finally said, trying to maintain his composure. "But why should we sell to you?" The question hung in the air for a moment. She stood up, walking to the window overlooking the city. "Because I'm not just buying a hotel," she replied. "I'm buying into its potential. While your current management sees diversity as a threat, I see it as your biggest untapped market. Your occupancy rates are down 40%, your reputation is suffering, and your operational costs are rising. I'm offering you not just money, but a graceful exit from a failing strategy." The room fell silent. Her words had hit home. The board members exchanged glances, whispered among themselves. They knew she was right. Their old way of doing business was dying. As the afternoon wore on, lawyers from both sides worked on the details. She stepped out briefly to call her investment team. "It's happening," she whispered, trying to contain her excitement. "They're going to sell." By evening, as the city lights began twinkling outside, the deal was ready. Hands were shaken, papers were signed. The Grand Palmer Hotel, with all its history and potential, would have a new owner. Walking out of the boardroom, she paused by one of the old paintings. Soon, these walls would tell different stories. They would reflect the true diversity of their city, their guests, and their staff. In the lobby, she overheard 2 employees whispering about the ownership change. Their faces showed mixture of concern and hope. She made a mental note to meet with all staff members personally to share her vision and hear their ideas. That night, she stood outside the hotel, looking up at its magnificent facade. Tomorrow, headlines would announce the sale. Social media would buzz with the story of how a woman turned discrimination into ownership. But for her, the real work was just beginning. Her phone buzzed one last time that day. A message from her real estate lawyer. "Congratulations, boss. The papers are officially filed. The Grand Palmer is yours." She smiled, remembering that evening when she'd been turned away. She'd walked out of these doors feeling humiliated but determined. Now she was walking back in as the owner, ready to transform not just a hotel, but an entire industry's approach to hospitality. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, renovations, retraining, rebranding. But tonight, she allowed herself to savor this moment. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't just success. It's using that success to ensure no one else faces the same discrimination. The first morning as the new owner of the Grand Palmer Hotel felt surreal. She arrived early, just as the sun was beginning to paint the sky in soft pinks and oranges. A few surprised employees watched as she walked through the grand entrance, not as a guest this time, but as their new boss. The first item on her agenda was a staff meeting in the hotel's largest ballroom. Nervous whispers filled the room as employees gathered, from housekeepers to front desk staff, from kitchen workers to management. Many had heard rumors about the new owner, but few knew the whole story. "Some of you might remember me," she began, her voice clear and warm. 2 months ago, I was turned away from this hotel. Today, I'm standing here as your new owner. But this isn't a story about revenge. It's about transformation. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on her. She shared her vision for the hotel's future. Modern training programs, fair promotion policies, improved working conditions. As she spoke, she noticed some employees wiping away tears. Later, she learned that many of them had witnessed discrimination but felt powerless to stop it. "We're not firing anyone," she announced, bringing sighs of relief. "Instead, we're going to learn and grow together." She introduced her team of experts: hospitality trainers, diversity consultants, customer service specialists. The renovation plans were met with excitement, especially when she mentioned that all employees would receive pay during the construction phases. After the meeting, a housekeeper approached her quietly. "I've worked here for 15 years, she said, her voice trembling. "This is the first time I felt seen and heard." They talked for a while, and the housekeeper shared valuable insights about improving guest services. Throughout the day, she walked every floor of the hotel, talking with staff, making notes, and learning about their daily challenges. In the kitchen, she discovered talented cooks who had never been promoted despite their skills. At the front desk, she found young employees with innovative ideas that had been ignored by previous management. The afternoon brought the first training session. The grand ballroom was transformed into a learning space. Employees who usually worked different shifts now sat together, sharing experiences and ideas. When the diversity trainer asked about past incidents of discrimination, the stories poured out, not just about guests, but about staff treatment too. "From today," she declared, "every person who walks through those doors, guest or employee, will be treated with equal respect." She introduced a new booking system that removed any possibility of discriminatory practices. The old coding system that had been used to flag certain guests was demolished. In the hotel's historic restaurant, she met with the chef and his team. Together, they planned a menu that would celebrate diverse cuisines while maintaining the hotel's luxury standards. The chef's eyes lit up as he shared ideas he'd been holding back for years. As evening approached, she gathered the management team. Some looked uncomfortable, knowing they had been part of the old system. "We all have a chance to be part of something extraordinary," she told them. "The past is the past. What matters is what we do from today." She ended her first day by visiting every department, thanking each employee personally. In the laundry room, in the maintenance office, at the valet stand. Everywhere she went, she saw hope replacing fear, enthusiasm replacing resignation. Back in her new office, once the CEO's room of privilege, now a space for inclusive leadership, she reviewed the day's notes. The challenges ahead were significant: updating policies, changing mindsets, renovating spaces. But the energy she'd felt today confirmed what she already knew: change was possible. Looking out her window at the city lights, she thought about all the people who would stay in this hotel in the future. They would find not just luxury, but true hospitality. Not just service, but sincere welcome. Her phone buzzed with messages from employees sharing their excitement about the changes. One message particularly touched her. "Today was the first day I felt proud to work here." It was from the front desk clerk who had turned her away 2 months ago. Sometimes, she thought, the biggest changes start with the smallest moments of understanding. The Grand Palmer wasn't just getting a physical makeover. It was getting a soul makeover, and everyone was part of the transformation. 6 months had passed since the ownership change, and the Grand Palmer Hotel was buzzing with activity. The morning light streamed through newly installed windows, highlighting the fresh paint and restored wooden details. The lobby, once stuck in the past, now perfectly balanced historic charm with modern warmth. Today was special. It was the grand reopening of the hotel's first completely renovated wing. Camera crews from local news stations gathered outside, eager to cover the story of the hotel's remarkable transformation. But before the public ceremony, she had something more important to do. She stood in front of the mirror in her office, adjusting her jacket, when a knock came at the door. It was her assistant, carrying a familiar-looking folder. "We found it in the old files," he said excitedly. "The original booking from the day they turned you away." She smiled, thinking about how that moment of discrimination had led to this day of triumph. The morning staff meeting was different today. Instead of the usual updates, she asked everyone to share their favorite story from the past 6 months. A young gullhop talked about helping an elderly couple celebrate their 50th anniversary, making sure their room was perfect. A housekeeper shared how she'd been promoted to training supervisor, now teaching others the new standards of excellence. The front desk manager, the same one who had turned her away months ago, stood up with tears in his eyes. "I used to follow rules that made me ashamed," he admitted. "Now I sleep better at night, knowing we welcome everyone with respect." The room burst into applause. They all understood the journey. Walking through the hotel, she noticed the small but significant changes. The new artwork on the walls celebrated diverse artists. The restaurant menu now featured dishes from around the world. Even the employee break room had been renovated, showing that every space and every person mattered. At noon, she gathered with her team in the grand ballroom. The renovation had transformed it into a stunning space that took people's breath away. Local business leaders, community members, and media representatives filled the room. But the front rows were reserved for the hotel staff. They were the real stars of this transformation. 6 months ago, she began her speech. This hotel was known for turning people away. Today, we're known for welcoming everyone. She shared stories of the changes, not just the physical renovations, but the human transformations. The new training programs had become a model for other hotels. Their diverse hiring practices had attracted talented staff from across the country. A surprise guest stood up to speak, the musician who had been turned away just before she bought the hotel. "I've stayed in hotels worldwide," he said, "but what you've created here is special. It's not just about luxury anymore, it's about dignity." The highlight of the ceremony was presenting awards to staff members who had embraced the changes most enthusiastically. The housekeeper who had become a supervisor received a standing ovation. The chef who had revolutionized the menu wiped away tears as he accepted his award. After the ceremony, she took a quiet moment in the new garden courtyard, a space that had once been a neglected parking area. A young family was checking in at the front desk, their little girl's eyes wide with wonder at the beautiful surroundings. The parents were being treated with the same respect as the business executives in expensive suits nearby. That evening, she hosted a dinner for all staff members and their families. The grand ballroom was filled with laughter and celebration. Children ran between tables, employees from different departments chatted like old friends, and the barriers that had once divided them were nowhere to be seen. As she looked around the room, she remembered something her grandmother used to say: "Sometimes life's biggest setbacks lead to your greatest comebacks." The hotel that had once rejected her was now a symbol of inclusion and excellence. Just before midnight, she took one last walk through the quiet hallways. Every corner held a story of transformation. The old hotel hadn't just changed its policies, it had found its heart. And in doing so, it had changed not just its own future, but the lives of everyone who walked through its doors. 1 year had passed since that fateful day when she was turned away from the Grand Palmer Hotel. Now, standing on the rooftop garden during the hotel's first anniversary celebration under her ownership, she could hardly believe the transformation. The evening air was filled with music and laughter as guests from all walks of life mingled together. Business magazines had dubbed the Grand Palmer the most innovative hotel turnaround of the year. But for her, the real success wasn't in the awards or recognition. It was in the small moments that happened every day. Earlier that morning, she had witnessed something beautiful at the front desk. A young girl, probably about 7 years old, was watching her parents check in. The front desk clerk had bent down to her eye level, handed her a small stuffed animal, and said, "Welcome to your home away from home. Princess. The girl's eyes lit up with joy, and her parents exchanged grateful looks. The hotel's occupancy rates had doubled in the past year. More importantly, their guest satisfaction scores were the highest in the city. The secret wasn't just in the luxury amenities, it was in the genuine warmth that every staff member now showed to every guest. During the anniversary celebration, she invited some special guests to speak. The first was a local business school professor who now used the Grand Palmer as a case study in his classes. This hotel, he announced, proved that doing the right thing isn't just morally correct, it's good business. The hotel's training program had become famous in the hospitality industry. Other hotels sent their staff to learn about inclusive excellence. The front desk manager, who had once turned her away, was now leading these training sessions, teaching others how to break free from prejudice and embrace true hospitality. In the kitchen, the chef had earned his first Michelin star. His menu, celebrating cuisines from around the world while maintaining the highest standards of fine dining, had food critics raving. But what made him most proud was his apprenticeship program for young cooks from underprivileged backgrounds. As the sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, she gathered all the staff for a group photo. The photographer had to keep backing up. The team had grown so much. From housekeeping to management, every department was now filled with diverse, talented people who took pride in their work. A surprise visitor arrived at the celebration. Her grandmother, now in her 80s, who had always taught her to turn obstacles into opportunities. As the elderly woman toured the hotel, tears streamed down her face. "This," she said, holding her granddaughter's hand, "this is what I always dreamed was possible." The evening's highlight was announcing their new scholarship program. The hotel would fund hospitality management education for promising students from underserved communities. "We're not just changing one hotel," she explained. "We're changing the future of hospitality." Late that night, after most guests had left, she sat in the lobby with her original team. They reminisced about that first day, the challenges they'd faced, the doubters they proved wrong. The hotel's success hadn't just changed minds, it had changed hearts. Just then, a family walked in, tired travelers who had gotten delayed at the airport. Without hesitation, the night manager upgraded them to a suite, arranged for a late-night meal, and made sure their children got extra blankets. This wasn't special treatment. It was now the Grand Palmer standard. Looking at the massive guest book on the front desk, filled with countless thank you notes and stories of wonderful stays, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The hotel that had once been a symbol of discrimination had become a beacon of hope. Before heading home, she stopped by her office to pick up some papers. On her desk sat the framed cancellation email from that day a year ago. Next to it was a recent letter from a young girl who wrote, "Thank you for making a hotel where everyone feels like a VIP." As she turned off the lights, she smiled at how life had come full circle. The door that had been closed to her had led her to open thousands of doors for others. The Grand Palmer wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was proof that when you fight discrimination with determination and success, everyone wins. The story of the Grand Palmer would be told for years to come, not just as a business success, but as a reminder that sometimes the best response to prejudice is to rise above it and create something beautiful that everyone can share.